Perfect, perfect. So I am going to start with some housekeeping stuff and kind of keep an eye on that admit so I can keep letting people in. So if I keep turning like this, don't be annoyed by me. So hi everybody, my name is Jenna Nilo. I am the Director of Marketing and Outreach with Illinois Digital Educators Alliance. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is a great opportunity that we have throughout the month of January to feature some of our IDEAcon speakers. So people that are going to be presenting at IDEAcon next month, they've been gracious enough to actually give us presentations that they're not actually going to have at IDEAcon. So these are some bonus presentations and a great opportunity in this free Wednesday webinar to really hear from some great speakers and get some great information. So Shannon is our guinea pig today. She's our first to go. And I'm going to let her speak in just a minute and introduce herself. But before I begin, I kind of mentioned earlier, but if you're late to the game, not late to the game, if you're just getting here, the game hasn't started yet. If you're just getting here, just go ahead and do me a favor, keep yourself muted throughout the presentation so that Shannon doesn't get any feedback. I'm going to do the same in half a second here, and then you won't hear my dog barking in the background when she decides to go bonkers, which we all know happens. Also, if you want to go ahead and you're welcome to keep your video on, but if you keep it off, then when your kid walks through the background shirtless, which happens in my house all the time as well, I have 3 teenage sons, then no one will have to be privy to that either. So your call, but however you want to handle that. That's the housekeeping. As I said, we are recording. And we are also, you'll get a copy of the slide deck. So tomorrow I'll send you an email, everybody who registered with the recording, the slide deck, and then actually a copy of the chat file as well. So I will link all the, any links, any URLs that come up in it. I'll link all that for you and attach that PDF, and that email will get to you tomorrow. It will also, the video will also be posted on the Wednesday webinar page of our website, which I'll show you later. And all that good stuff. So without further ado, I think, oh, PDHs. If you are here for PDHs, I will put that link in the chat window at the end. So stick around to the end. I'll let you know when it's coming, and just keep an eye out for that link. And then it's a Google form. You have to click it, enter your information. It sends you back, I think, a certification or something like that. So just go ahead and do that, and you will get your 1-hour PDH for today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over. I'm going to stop screen sharing. I am going to turn things over to Shannon. Oh, let's see if I can stop screen sharing. There we go. Close that, stop share. So all Shannon, right. Off to you. Thanks so much for being here. We're looking forward to it.
I'm going to see if I can share my screen. Here we go. Good afternoon. I'm Shannon Schroeder, and I think this is going to work. Yeah, there we go. Hopefully you can see that. There we go. We're Mission Control Google Classroom. This is a beginner session. I do have a few points and tips that kind of lead you into the intermediate of Google Classroom. But we're going to really focus on getting started and a lot of pro tips to make the workflow in Google Classroom more effective for you. If you want these slides, like Jenna said, she's going to send them out. But if you want to pull them up and kind of follow along, it's the bit.ly GC Mission Control, GC Mission Control, all lowercase, and that's going to give you the slides. You're welcome to make a copy of them, put them in your drive, reference them later. Any of those is perfectly fine with me. I'm here to share. And speaking of sharing, you can always feel free to contact me or reach out to me. I'm on Twitter. I have a Classroom, Instagram, and my email obviously is there. I am a Google certified trainer, and I just got my national board certification. So whoop, whoop. Once again, Shannon Schroeder, rhymes with Darth Vader. And we're going to talk about Google Classroom. I have a jam-packed session here. And I'm going to kind of zip through a few things. If it helps you to have a notebook nearby or your Google Keep open, you know, jot down some tips that will help you as we go through Google Classroom. We can do so much with Google Classroom. I'm not even going to read through all of this, but you can see all of the things that we can do with Google Classroom. And it is an amazing tool, and figuring out how to leverage it for you and for your students will really, I think, improve not only your efficacy, but their productivity. And so this is why, hopefully this picture will load. It's my mission control room. This is why we like to think about Google Classroom as a mission control. There it is. And you can really control so many different aspects of your teaching and student learning through this tool. So this is what we're going to focus on today. This is sort of our learning objectives for today. And I'm assuming that you're pretty much a beginner. Maybe you're a little familiar with Google Classroom. I think everybody will get a little something out of it today. I have a few tips in here that are a little more intermediate. But I think I'm really focused on just getting started. And so if you have the slides, which again is the bit.ly GC mission control, you can go through them again at your own pace. All right, so this is where I need to figure out how to, there we go. So when we talk about the Google symbols for navigation, I teach my students the hamburger, waffle, snowman, gear, and arrow. And this just gives us a common language. And I'm going to show you what those look like in Google Classroom. So this is your hamburger. And this is your, I have to move this over here. This is over here, your waffle. So the 3x3 little grid. And then you'll see the snowman is the 3 little dots. And then when you're making assignments, you'll see arrows as drop-down menus. So I take a little bit of time when I first introduce Google Classroom to my students and talk about hamburger, waffles, snowman, gear, arrow, so that we're kind of using the same common language, and it really helps them to navigate from place to place. Starting at the very beginning, the first thing you're going to want to do is create a Google Classroom. Most schools right now are shifting into a new semester. And so whether or not you want to archive your old Google Classroom and start fresh is something to consider. I think I'm going to start fresh this new semester because it kind of feels like a clean slate for my students. To start a new Google Classroom, and they're free, you can start them, you know, you can create them all you want. You just click, you go to Google Classroom, or sorry, classroom.google.com and click the plus in the upper right-hand corner there, and then just click create. When you first create a Google Classroom, you have to provide a little bit of information, and it's really kind of self-explanatory. You have to name your classroom. And then the next most important thing to do is to check your notifications. And this is one of those kind of pro tips that kind of people forget. And so to check your notifications, so once you've created a Google Classroom, you're going to come over here to Hamburger Home, and that gives you your dashboard. If you go to the hamburger and you go all the way down to this gear, the settings, I don't know why they're sort of hidden, but there they are. They're kind of tucked away. You're going to click the settings, and this is where you determine the notifications that you get, the email notifications that you get. And you can see I have mine all on because I teach hybrid and remote, and I have my students emailing me and leaving private comments for me. By the way, pro tip, your students also need to do that in order to receive private comments. They need to go to that hamburger all the way down to the gear, and then they will receive the private comments. If they don't do that, they won't get your private comments. They won't be able to use their email in that way. All right. Let's talk about a little bit of organization. When you open up your dashboard, that home menu, you see these tiles, and you should be able to just click and drag and drop those tiles, so it's easy to reorganize your dashboard just by clicking and dragging. And then there's 3 other dots here, 3 other menus to be aware of. The snowman allows you to move, edit, copy, or archive. So archive just means you're kind of tucking it away. It's not deleted, it's still there, but it's not accessible. So if you were starting a new semester and you want to archive your old semester, that's how you'll do that. You'll go to that snowman menu and then just click archive. The arrow underneath the tile there that you see, if you look at this GIF or GIF, that arrow is a shortcut to your Google Classroom gradebook. And then that folder holds everything in Google Classroom. And so just navigating around your Google Classroom dashboard, you can either click on the class name and then navigate there, or you can click on the hamburger, and I'll show you what that looks like in real time on my classroom. So here, if I'm on the hamburger, I can get to my test class by going there, or if I'm on my dashboard, I can get to my test class just by clicking right on the name. All right, so just a couple like kind of quick, easy navigation ways to move around Google Classroom. All right, we need to talk about settings. If you've started a new Google Classroom, it's important to talk about settings, and you get there by going to the gear in the Google Classroom. This is a different gear than the gear I showed you before. And you're gonna have to make some decisions about your settings. You're gonna have to make some decisions about your settings. This slide kind of walks you through the different choices that you have, but I'll show you in my real Google Classroom or my test Google Classroom. This is, let me show you again, there's the gear. When you click on that gear, it lets you make some choices. And honestly, I think kind of just playing around with these and figuring out what works best for you is probably the most effective way. I leave my invitation code on. And this is the only one that I'm sort of a hard line about. I put hide notifications classwork on the stream, and I'm going to show you why in just a minute. But if you hide the notifications in your classwork on the stream, it really helps students to go to the classwork tab instead of the stream. And I think this is something that beginners kind of miss because it is in the settings. I really highly recommend hide those notifications, and I'll show you what it looks like in a Google Classroom in just a second. The other decision you have to make is how open do you want your Google Classroom? Do you want your students to post and comment, or students only commenting, or only teachers commenting? And so you just kind of have to decide and set some norms and standards with your students and determine how much freedom you want to give them within that Google Classroom. To invite students, it's super easy. You can just share the invitation code, or you can add student emails. So now that if we have students who are remote, I just add the student emails. You cannot force a student to join your Google Classroom. They do have to click join, but sharing the code is a pretty quick way. Let's talk about the stream. And again, in the stream, I kind of did green, yellow, and red here because you want to determine how much control your students, or how much freedom your students have in the stream. And I like to think of the stream as a place where announcements are kept, or it's maybe those sort of conversations that you would have with your students in the hallway. So I like to keep the stream just for announcements and the classwork tab just for the work. And if you can teach that mode to your students, it will make for a cleaner workflow. All right, so that's pretty much the stream tab. And in your Google Classroom, you have 4 tabs: the stream tab, the classwork tab, the people tab, and the grades tab. We're going to spend pretty much the rest of the time together really talking about the classwork tab and how to navigate that, and how to really leverage the classwork tab so that your students are able to find what they need to do, because that's part of it. I always say if the workflow doesn't flow, the work doesn't flow, right? So keeping your classwork tab really organized is key. All right, and again, stream is for announcements, classwork is for work, and really pushing your students to do that will help everybody know where to go. If you don't put hide notifications in the stream, everything goes in the stream and it just gets disorganized and really messy. All right, we're shifting over to the classwork tab, and in the classwork tab, you're given options. You basically have 6 different options, and here they are. You can create an assignment, a quiz assignment, question material, reuse post, or you can create a topic. And I'm just going to kind of walk through these and kind of push you to think about these and using these maybe in some different ways. To get started, you're just going to click add and create, and you can add anything from your Google Drive, links, files, YouTube menus, or YouTube videos, drawings, forms, anything from Google, any PDFs. So really think broadly about how you're going to add things to your Google Classroom for your students to do. Really anything. The next step is to think about how editable or how viewable that item is. Do you want your students just to view it? Do you want your students to be able to edit that file? Or do you want to make a copy for each student, which is akin to going to the copy machine and passing out the paper? So generally speaking, I make a copy for each student if it's an activity that each student is going to do. And you do that simply by clicking and just following the prompts. I really love that aspect of Google Classroom, that it really is so user-friendly. And don't be afraid to click those buttons or click the arrows. This just kind of walks you through how you would add. There you go. We're going to add a Google Doc. I want to make a copy for each student. I can determine if it's graded or not graded. And I can determine a due date and even a due time. And then you want to use topics. I'm going to talk about topics in just a second, because topics are going to help your students to stay organized. Any assignment that you give a due date to will show up on the student's Google Calendar. So I tell teachers who are new to Google Classroom, put a due date on there kind of no matter what, because then students will be able to see it on their Google Calendar. And it's going to be something that helps them to stay organized. All right. The next choice is quiz assignment. And my opinion about the quiz assignment is just don't even bother with the quiz assignment. If you want to do a quiz, use a Google form. And really the reason is when you do a quiz assignment, it saves the Google form in your Google Classroom folder and not in a place where you can access it later. So I'm kind of breeze over that in the interest of time. I altogether avoid the quiz assignments. But I love using the question assignment. I love using the question assignment for exit tickets, brainstorming, bell ringers, reflections. You do have to make sure your settings are set up so that students can comment. And then you just have a couple of decisions. You can use a short answer question, or you can use a multiple choice question. I love the short answer for those SEL connections, like, tell me 3 words about your winter break, or something, what are your favorite pizza toppings? Those things that we're really struggling with now as we're remote. I think it's a great way to kind of pull students in. And that's the question assignment or the question option. And then you have material, and material is exactly what it sounds like. Think of material as a digital resource that students will reference, but they don't need to turn it in and they don't need to edit it or add to it. So for me, I teach, oh, my cat is trying to walk across my keyboard. For me, I teach 8th grade English language arts. And so typically in a normal year, I would have a folder of, I would ask my students to keep a binder of reference materials. Well, now I'm doing it digitally, and I'm just dropping all of those documents under material. It's just like handing them something that they're going to reference. And you can, again, add YouTube videos or drawings or Google Forms. You can add anything as material. All right, for newbies to Google Classroom, if there's one thing I think you should get comfortable with is this idea of reuse post. So reusing a post, it's going to, first of all, save you time and energy and effort. And it's going to allow you to edit and reinvent sort of your assignments. So for me, I have 4 different classes, and I post something to my first period class. And then when I go to post it to my second period class, if I go to schedule it, I just reuse the post and I can schedule it, and boom, 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 it shows up on time. Because you can only schedule assignments to one class at a time. The pro tip with the reuse posts that I really like to emphasize is this: get with your colleagues, create a Google Classroom where you guys just dump everything that you're doing with your students collaboratively, put it in this Google Classroom, call it the file cabinet Google Classroom. And then when you go to assign to your students, what you can do is you can pull up that other Google Classroom, reuse the post, and voila, you're done. And you can go to bed earlier. I hope that makes sense. Play around a little bit with reuse posts. It's exactly what it sounds like. And then the last sort of option in your classwork when you're creating an assignment is to use topics. And this is another issue that beginner teachers or beginners with Google Classroom kind of overlook. A topic will help you and your students to have a workflow that works. And I really encourage you to think about your naming conventions for your topics. I have them by week. So I have week 1, week 2, week 3. And my students all know that, whatever week we're on, that's where the information for that week is going to be. I have some colleagues who do it by day. You are limited to 100 topics. So if you are doing daily topics, you're eventually probably going to run out. Or you could do by units. Just really think about how you're going to name those topics. And I'll show you what it looks like in my Google Classroom in just a second. Pro tip, so a little more intermediate, is to use emojis in your topic titles. So you can go to Emoji Keyboard Extension or emojipedia.com. And when you name your topics, put an emoji in there. This is my Unit 1 suspense topic, and I put, the little magnifying glass there. And the students know. For my classrooms, I have a green check mark is the emoji on all of the work we're actively working on. And then when something is done, I have a little emoji that's like a timer, so time's up. And that helps students to be able to navigate Google Classroom, especially with a new semester coming up. A good workflow would be to put those emojis in your naming of your topics. A couple other pro tips. You can number your topics to search in a Google Classroom. Just like anything else, you can do Control F. So my students we do word origins every week, and they can never find the Unit 5 word origin. So I tell them, when you're in Google Classroom, just go Control F and it'll pop up, Control F and then Unit 5, and whatever you're searching for will highlight and you can find it right away. So teaching that to your students is really helpful too. Don't forget, you can drag and drop your assignments and topics, and I'll show you what that looks like. And you can also integrate other resources. So like quizzes works really beautifully with Google Classroom. And there's a whole bunch of other. Seesaw works beautifully with Google Classroom. So if I want to just move these around, I can just drag and drop. You can also go to the snowman here and move up or down, but the dragging and dropping. So I would just move, I can show you what my real classroom looks like here. So in my real classroom, I would just move week 17 up, oops, you just click on the name and just move it up and it's good to go. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's good for that. Oh, okay. So one of the most beautiful things about Google Classroom is that it really does make differentiation easy. When you assign something to your students, you don't have to assign it to every student. You can pick and choose which students you want that assignment assigned to. And so let's think about differentiation here for just a quick second. If you have an assignment and you want to assign it for group A, group B, and group C, but you want group B and C to have different assignments than group A, create an assignment for group B and assign it to those students, and then reuse that assignment and assign it to group A. And then you can reuse group B and assign it to group C. I know this sounds kind of confusing, but I'm imagining you have like a mid-level assignment, that's group B. Maybe you make it more challenging. You alter the assignment and you assign that to group A. Maybe you make it a little less challenging and you alter that assignment and you assign that to group C. So just to kind of show you how that would work, if I go in here to create an assignment, I don't have to assign it to all my students. I can pick and choose which students I want that to be assigned to. And lickety split, I've got differentiation happening. So just kind of play around with that a little bit, or work with your colleagues to think about how you can use that assign to students aspect of Google Classroom to help you differentiate. This is one tip that I think has saved me with Google Meets. We use Google Meets, but even if you use Zoom, this is going to help you. In your Google assignment, Google Classroom assignment, those 3 dots, that little snowman menu allows you to copy the link. And so almost every day when I'm on Google Meets with my students, I'll grab whatever assignment I want them to go to. I click the 3 dots, the little snowman there, and I copy the link and I paste it into the chat. And so now that totally avoids this, oh, Mrs. Schroeder, where is it? Is it under week 17? What? No, here, I'm just going to give you the link, and it pushes your students right to the assignment that they need. And I really think that's like, for remote learning, that's like key tip. All right, workflow.
Shannon?
Yes.
Hi, sorry to interrupt you
That's
because
okay.
I don't want to get too far off the topic. Somebody asked, can you create groups for assigning to a student? So not the individuals, but can you create a group?
So the best way here, I'm going to jump over to my sample classroom and just kind of show you. The best way to do a group, let me jump to my test class. Oh, I'm going to actually show you on my real class. The best way to do a group would be to create an assignment. And let's say over here, I want, my first 6 students to be in a group. I'm going to click my first 6 students there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? And that I'm going to assign group A. I'm not actually going to do it because they're on winter break, but I would say group A, and fill out the rest of this page here, putting in the points and the due date and the topic. And I'm going to talk about rubrics in just a little bit, and then assign it. And those 6 students are going to get that assignment. Then I'm going to go to reuse post. Okay, so reuse. And what am I going to reuse? I'm going to reuse that same assignment, group A, and hold on, I need to move yeah, there we go. I'm going to reuse that. It takes just a second to think. And now you can see this is group A. I'm going to change it to say group B. And I'm going to assign this, uncheck there, and go to my next 6 students. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to start here and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whichever students you want. And that's the best way to do groups, I think, in my experience. There's another workaround, but in my experience, that's how I would do groups. Are there any other questions in the chat? I know I have a lot to go through, so I'm kind of like speed demon-ing my way through it.
I'm keeping an eye on them for you. I'll
Okay.
interrupt when they come through.
Okay, please do.
Thanks.
Please don't hesitate to interrupt. I'm kind of on a roll. All right, so that's your basic with your classwork tabs, and kind of keeping things flowing. You want to think about your own workflow. And one tip that I would like to give beginners in Google Classroom is to schedule your assignments. Now, you can only schedule 1 class at a time. So I teach 4 different classes. I'll schedule for my period 1 class, something that, we have something that we do every day. So I have bell work that we do every single day. So every single day at 9:32 in my first period class, boom, my bell work is scheduled, and it shows up right at that time. Now I want to do the bell work for my second period class. Let's say that that's at 10:32. I'm going to go to my next Google Classroom and reuse that post and then just schedule it for 10:32. So the combination of schedule and reuse is a really sweet workflow because you don't have to redo each and every assignment. And I think once you kind of get used to that, it can save you a ton of time. If you have assignments that are always posted on Wednesday or they're always posted at 8:30, you can use that combination of schedule, so picking the date and time that it's going to post on your Google Classroom, and then just reusing that again and again. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. All right. That's pretty much classwork, the classwork tab. I'm going to shift and talk about comments and feedback for a little bit. And this is really where a student, let's say a student has completed an assignment and now you need to give some comments and you need to give some feedback. There's basically 3 different types of comments or feedback available to you in Google Classroom. There's class comments, everybody can see those. Private comments, which are my favorite, and then a comment bank. I'm not planning on spending a whole lot of time, I'm looking at my time here, I'm not planning on spending a whole lot of time on the comment bank, but if you have the bit.ly, you can see the slides that kind of walk you through the comment bank. That's just commenting on individual assignments. The class comments and the private comments is what we're going to talk about next. So kind of a pro tip for class comments is to make sure that you've allowed your settings for students to comment. And I will go to the class comments in my Google Classroom after I've put all of the grades in the grade book. So we use PowerSchool at my school. And so I'll go through and I'll grade an assignment and I will post on the class comments, students, your grade has been posted in PowerSchool. Please let me know if you have any questions. And students can comment if you allow in your settings, they can comment back to you. Or if you allow students to comment, again, that was in that gear settings in the very beginning, then they can ask questions. And I'll get questions like, Mrs. Schroeder, are we supposed to color code? Or Mrs. Schroeder, do we need to write complete sentences? I feel like I get that one all the time. So as long as you set those norms, I've really never had any issues with having to mute students. I spent a lot of time setting norms on behavior, but I like this idea that students can actually comment on the class comments. And I can give extra directions. If I find that students have questions on an assignment, I can give additional instructions in those class comments. Shifting gears, we're going to talk about private comments, which I think are like the best thing going. Now, before you do private comments, your students have to have in their settings their notifications open for private comments. And I can show you again how they would do that. So Hamburger Home, they're going to come all the way over here and again go down to these settings that we talked about at the very beginning, and they need to make sure that private comments, where is it? Private comments on work is turned on, okay? If they don't have that turned on, they will not get any of the private comments that you leave for your students, okay? So that's key. What I love about private comments is it's a give and take back and forth between you and your student. Only that particular student can see the private comment. So it's a good way to individualize your feedback. However, I do a lot of copy and paste on private comments too. So I like to use it as a record of growth or journaling. And I also use Mote or Screencastify, and I'll show you what those do here in just a second, to give feedback to my students. So let me show you what that looks like in a sample assignment. So here is, let me go to my student here. Here's my student, my test student, and let's pretend that they've completed this work. If I want to give a private comment, I'm just going to come over here and I'll say, excellent work. Now I have an extension called Moat, and this is kind of like my pro tip here. And I don't know if you saw it, it popped up. There it is. This is an extension. Now it was free. I think it's now, I think they now charge you, but it's nominal. Oh, I haven't signed in a while. Hold on. It's nominal, but I think it's a really fantastic thing. Here we go. Because it allows me to record my voice for my students. So this for me was a game changer. Here we go. It's recording my voice right now because I just clicked, and now I'm going to click done. And when I hit post, my student doesn't have to have this extension, only I have to have it. Here we go. It's recording my voice right now because there you go. Did you hear that? So for me, that was a game changer because I could use the extension Moat to leave voice feedback. And my students really, especially my full remote students really like having that feedback. The other thing that I use often is Screencastify. So I'll screencast as I'm giving feedback to my students, and then I'll just drop the link in that private comment right there. And my students, sorry, and my students can hear my voice, and they can see what I'm doing. I don't know why my phone is ringing so loudly. Are we doing okay on the chat, Donna?
We had one other question. I'm scrolling back up.
Sorry.
Do you know if Google is bringing back Share to Classroom? This person used it, but found that Google discontinued it.
Oh, I don't know. I did like Share to Classroom. I don't know why that disappeared or why that went away. And it was pretty sweet. You had that little extension and you could just click on it and whatever you had. It's easy. I think it's easy enough to find the link for whatever you're doing. I felt like it was a little redundant. I don't know if it's coming back. I'm sorry. It was a pretty sweet workflow. I have a couple really cool things though that are on your mobile app. So on your mobile app, if you have Google Classroom, you can do, this is kind of like pro tip. It's going to open up here in a second. If you go to the selector tool on your phone or iPad, this works on iPad too, you can do, remember the popsicle sticks? I'm sure we all have the popsicle sticks to pull the student's name. Oh, it's loading really slowly on my phone. If you go to, there's like a little diamond shape inside a square. If you open up under the student tab or the people tab in your Google Classroom, here it is. So I don't know if you can see, but it's up there in the corner and you just click it and it will do basically the popsicle sticks, and you can either call that student later or you can mark them absent. So this is only in the mobile, on iPhone or iPad. The other thing that's really cool that a lot of people don't realize, because I'm an English teacher and my colleagues are like, oh, I really like to handwrite feedback. You can on the iPad. So if you go to your mobile app on the iPad, Google Classroom, and you open up, there's a way to, I have a little demonstration, but you just open it up on the mobile. You can use a stylus and write, and you can choose a color. You can write right on that student's document, as long as it's a Google document. You can do slides, as long as it's Google. And you can write right on top. And you can see the example here. If you have a decent stylus that you like and an iPad, you can still write right on top of the student's work. It's nice to put big smiley faces or check marks or whatever. And it creates a PDF of that particular assignment, and the student has access to it as soon as you're done. It's really a pretty easy workflow. All right, we're going to talk about rubrics because I am not a math person, I'm not going to lie, but I love these rubrics because they do the math for me. When we're talking about rubrics, there's 3 ways. You can either create them from scratch, reuse them, or import from sheets. Rarely will you import from sheets. So we're really just talking about creating and reusing. when you decide to create a rubric, and I love putting rubrics on almost everything because it allows that feedback process for my students to be really kind of, it's a slick feedback process. You have to decide if you want it scored. You're going to decide what criterion. So if you've ever written a rubric, you can use rubrics in Google Classroom. Trust me. You are going to title your criterion, give it some description, and then you can move the criterion around. And I'll show you what it looks like in just a second. So you can title your criterion, describe it, and then give whatever points you want. These little up and down arrows allow you to do this. My workflow tip is to create a basic rubric with your general grading terms. So like we use exceeds, meets, and requires more work. And we usually use a 4-point scale, right, in my department. So if your department has a standard grading, and if you're watching the screen, it's showing you exactly how to do it. My suggestion is you make a basic rubric and then just reuse it and adapt it for each assignment that you'd like a rubric on. I also like the idea, and you can see I've just duplicated that rubric. I also like the idea of putting a rubric. This is how you reuse the rubric. So if I've made a rubric for one assignment, I can just reuse it and then I can adjust it or adapt it for a different assignment. So if you create a basic rubric, you know, introduction, body, conclusion, or completion, or sentence structure, whatever it is that you're doing, and it makes the workflow for giving feedback super quick because you just click reuse rubric, find it, and then it attaches to that assignment. What happens then is when you go to grade, all you have to do is click, 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 and the math is done for you. And you can even change the points before grading. If you've already started grading, you can't change the final points. But before you start grading, if you're like, oh, I said this was going to be 100 points when I created the assignment, but it really needs to only be 25, you can change those points and the rubric will adjust, which I love. And I can show you what that looks like. This is just an example of click, click, click. You can see how quickly, this is a big rubric on this particular assignment, but it's just a matter of clicking the rubric that pops up on the side. So let me show you what that actually looks like in an actual assignment. So here's, let me go back to my classwork. So here's my assignment and I have a rubric attached to this assignment, I believe. Maybe I don't. Let me get the one that has the rubric attached to it. Hold on. 1 second. All right, I think this one, yeah, this one has a rubric attached to it. And I've actually graded it before, but that's okay. You can go back and regrade. When you open up the student's work, I can just, you notice it's 100 points, but I can just click through and it's going to, you see the points changing there. There we go. As I click. So, and if I want to see what this rubric actually says, if I need the descriptors, I can click that little down arrow and it'll show it to you. This is my all-time favorite thing, really, that they've added to Google Classroom, because it just makes for a really clean and quick workflow, and it allows you to very quickly give some feedback. So here's an example of the workflow that, that you might use. So you assign, make a copy for each student. The students complete that work and then they submit it. The teacher sees the student's work as it's completed. So you can actually see in Google Classroom the progression. You can toggle through the student work. You could even look at their revision history if you needed to, and then you begin that feedback loop. Using some feedback, whether you use comments, private comments, the comment bank, or the rubric, the student can then resubmit, right? And that's that feedback loop. I like to use comments and announcements, class comments, to help give class feedback. So I'll say, okay, on this assignment, you guys did really well on A, B, and C. but we all need to work on, so when I look at the trends of how my students have been performing, I can do that in the class comments. You can give private comments as long as those students have their settings, they can receive the private comments. I mentioned you can give comments using your voice, and then you can use the rubrics. And in the mobile, you can use the handwritten. So this feedback loop starts to be a really productive thing. If you're combining the rubrics and the private comments, the students are going to get quality feedback that's going to help them improve their learning. This slide just kind of shows you as students turn work in, you can see as they're turning in. So I'll click on the 4 students who haven't, or well, in this case, 4 students who've turned it in, but I haven't graded, and I'll say, okay, you guys still need to make some improvements on this. I hope everything's going okay for you. And then as you have students in Google Classroom, you can toggle through their work. Remember that down arrow? Don't hesitate to click it because it's going to allow you to toggle through. This is akin to having a stack of student work on your desk and moving it from one pile to the next. You can just click those arrows and toggle right through the students, and you can see right away who hasn't turned in their work. And you can use, let me show you in my real Google Classroom, my demo Google Classroom. So say, for example, this student hadn't turned in their work. I can click that student and send them a quick email by clicking that little, did you see how I did that? By clicking that little mail envelope, and I'm going to send them a quick email that says, get this work done. And the email that's composed, it automatically has the title of the assignment in there. So I think that's a really kind of cool workflow to help alert your students if they're students who check their email. All right, we're kind of at the review. We've talked about creating Google Classrooms, navigating with the hamburger home menu. We talked about settings and hiding notifications in the stream. And making sure that your settings, your notifications are the way that you want them so that you can get student emails, and making sure your student settings are so that they can get private comments. We talked about adding students. You can send the link or you can share the code. We talked about the stream, keeping the stream, really isolate that stream for questions or those more casual announcements or conversations that you might have with your students in the hallway, and keeping all of the work on the Classwork tab. We did a lot of talking about the Classwork tab, reusing, scheduling, rubrics, real quick introduction to rubrics. Give rubrics a try. If you haven't tried rubrics, they're super easy. It really is like a no-fail process. And then we talked about private comments. Now you can create a comment bank as well, and if you have the bit.ly, which is GC Mission Control, there are some additional slides in there that talk about comment banks. It's a little more intermediate. And we talked real briefly about rubrics. What questions or what things do you want to see again? I also have in your slide deck a bunch of links to different helpful resources. There's a Wakelet on there and Google Classroom support page.
Hey, Shannon.
Yes.
You've got to be exhausted. That was a ton. There was a question. What does the student view of a completed rubric, say that 10 times fast, look like? Is it the same as the teacher view?
It is very similar. I'm going to see if I can switch. Oh, I bet I can't switch my accounts because I'm in the, let me see if I can switch accounts. I can't switch accounts. It is very similar. They see the grid. So let me show you what. It's very similar. I think that's one of the weaknesses of Google Classroom. Hold on, I'm just clicking on the wrong thing here. I think that's one of the weaknesses of Google Classroom is that, and I don't know when it's coming, it should be out soon, I hope, is that teachers can't see what students see. If your administrator, your Google administrator will give you like a fake account, that's what I was trying to switch to. It's easy to see. They see pretty much what I'm showing you right now, and they see the, this looks very similar to what you see. They see the little rectangles and the color coding and the points for each section of that rubric. And they also see the total points there. You can't do, you can't do like A, B, or C unless you assign points to that. So you could assign points and call it A, B, or C. And then I just want to point out, you can change the total points right there. That snowman, don't hesitate to click on those snowmen or snow people, because if I got started on this assignment and I wanted to change the total points, if I change this, let's see if it'll do it, because I've already graded it. And let's say I wanted this out of 85. Is it going to let me do it? Yeah, look, it's going to, it's going to alter. I just love that because I hate doing that. Did that answer the question? It looks very similar.
Okay, there's a few other questions in the chat.
Okay.
What do students often struggle doing?
For my students, it's finding the assignment in Google Classroom. And it's that navigation. And I feel like until I figured out that I can grab the link to the assignment, I'll show you what that looks like. I can grab this link and copy the link and drop it in the chat, especially because we're remote right now. That's been like game changer as far as navigation. I have students who struggle navigating. And so one of the things that I've tried to do to help them is, I'm going to show you, this is my real classroom. First of all, making sure you're using topics that make sense. And use those emojis. I think especially for the younger kids, using those emojis. So like this is our green check mark. My students know this is a live assignment, like we're actively seeking that out. But this with the, what is that little thing called where the sand goes through? This, we're done with this. This is now late if you haven't done this. So I think using topics really helps them to navigate and making those topics make sense.
Great. Okay, I teach remote and have been using Google Classroom. I just had a student added to my class today. Can my new student see an assignment that was previously assigned to my entire class?
Yes, yes, they will. And so there's two ways to approach that. They will see everything that has been posted up to that point. You can go, if you don't want them to see it, you can go through those old assignments and uncheck their name. So here's just an example. If I wanted to uncheck, let me see if I can just show you. If I wanted to unassign this, I could go through and I could just uncheck that student, right? Does that make sense? The reason you might want to do that is because all of those previous assignments will show up as incomplete or missing. So it feels like a lot of work. The big debate that my colleagues and I are having right now is, do we start a new Google Classroom with the new semester? And that's something I used to say no, because I wanted everything in one place. But I think for this year, this idea of, with all the remote work, clean slate, fresh new Google Classroom, it kind of makes sense to me, because those students who are added in will have all of those previous assignments marked as not complete or incomplete, which can be overwhelming.
Definitely. Okay, and the last, oh, no, that was not. Okay, last question so far. When you choose make a copy for each student, my thing keeps flipping. When assigning something, does the original doc stay inaccessible, uneditable to students?
So yes, when you make a copy for each student, you still have the original document. It's no different than taking that paper. Like, I like to give an analogy for like paper, right? So it's no different than taking that paper, going to the copy machine, making 32 copies of it, and handing them out. You still have your original in your Google Drive. Where it gets messy is where you assign that the students can edit. So you want to be really careful about assigning that students can edit something, because then your original will get messed up. In that case, I just make a copy and then post the copy. That's a workflow to help with that.
Awesome. Any other questions, anybody? Otherwise, we're getting close to the hour, and I do want to be mindful of everybody's dinner time.
I will stop sharing my screen.
Okay, I'm going to share in a second here. I'm going to shrink you.
Please feel free to reach out to me. I'm sschroeder@homerschools.org or sschroederteach on Twitter. And I'm happy to. Oh, okay, so I'm seeing a question. Parents can enroll. So actually, parents can get guardian summaries. I do not recommend allowing your parents to join the Google Classroom. For one, there's some privacy issues. When you talk about parents in Google Classroom, they're going to get guardian summaries. And there's a link in the slides on that last page to the Google Help page, and that will answer some questions about guardian summaries.
Okay. Okay, I just posted in the chat your link for the PDHs for today, or PDH for today. I also posted 2 more links. The first is the Wednesday webinar link. As I said in the beginning, you will get a recording of today's session, plus the slide deck, plus the chat file. You will get that via email tomorrow. However, at any time, you can also go to our Wednesday webinar page on our website. The link is there. Send friends to it, whomever, and all of our webinars are posted there. So if you ever want to go back and review this one and or any of the other ones that we've done, there's a ton of great topics and opportunities there to learn. Obviously, you don't get the professional development hours because that's only for live attendance, but definitely get the learning, which is at the end of the day, what's most important. Also, there is the link to our calendar, and that is where you can, of course, sign up for any of our events. So definitely take a look out for those. On the screen right now, you will see our next webinar is next week, Wednesday, lo and behold. And that is another one of our IDEAcon webinars with Lisa Berghoff on engaging all learners, UDL EdTech Fusion. After that, we go to January 20th. One of our partners, Everfi, is going to be doing best practices for culturally relevant teaching. And then the following Friday is our last IDEAcon presenter webinar. And this is with Carrie Moulton, and it's going to be Google Slides Beyond the Presentation. So definitely go ahead and sign up. Those are all free events. And then, of course, we do have our IDEAcon conference coming up this February. If you liked Shannon's stuff today, and I'm sure you all did because it was awesome, definitely sign up for our conference and make sure that you're going to see more sessions from Shannon and then more from obviously all of the other great presenters throughout the state of Illinois. And then what's cool this year is we're also going to get an opportunity to learn from all of our colleagues in Texas. So we've collaborated with the TCA Convention and Exposition. So the conference is a month-long conference, starts February 1st, goes all the way till the 24th. It's both live and on demand. So any sessions that you see live, you're also going to have the opportunity, if you missed it live, to catch it on demand. So all kinds of learning opportunities available. We are running a special through Friday. So register before Friday to get the advanced purchase discounted rate. So I think that's it. Shannon, awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you, IDEAcon, for having me. I appreciate it. And like I said, listeners, please feel free to reach out to me if you have any additional questions. I'm happy to help anytime.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody. Everybody have a wonderful afternoon, and hopefully we'll see you all next week and then after that at IDEAcon. So have a good one. Thank you.